deputies, and I've come many times to this country, including to Cox's Bazar. There's a huge difference. There is a huge difference in terms of openness, in terms of embracing human rights, in terms of discussing and debating the issues, and in putting the issues on the table. And that's extremely encouraging. And I just hope that during this very difficult period of transition, that we can provide the support for the people of this country to be able to thrive in a way that marries both the human rights and the development approach. So yes, there is a huge difference. On the issue of the national healing process and how this relates to also political parties. I mean, the national healing process has always to be one that is homegrown. It needs to be national ownership. And for national healing to happen, you need accountability, you need justice, as I mentioned, you need truth-telling, you need memorialization, and you need what I mentioned as well, the non-recurrence of the past. Non-recurrence of the past means that you are, when it comes to political participation, for example, that you are guided by the very clear provisions of human rights law. And human rights law is clear about it. It promotes the freedom of assembly, the freedom of association, the freedom of political participation. There are indeed in human rights law certain restrictions, but the threshold is extremely high. So I hope that when you go through this process, that human rights is your compass, and that's your guide as you go through this very difficult process of healing and transition. The issue of anti-terrorism, look, we cannot. There has been a lot of discussions about terrorism laws and the so-called war on terror. We have seen the consequences of it because, unfortunately, the labeling of terrorism has been done in a way that has often also included people who disagree, who are in political dissent. So let's not forget that Nelson Mandela, our big hero, who has been healing a whole country, was considered a terrorist by the South African apartheid regime. And unfortunately, we often see this resurgence of the use and the labeling of terrorism, as we saw in the past year as well, as something in order to quash dissent and discussion. And I think it's really important again to learn the lessons also from this country in the way that terrorism was used and to stifle dissent. Attacks on, you mentioned, reported attacks on minorities. As I mentioned in my remarks, it is part of our fact-finding as well. As I said, protection of minorities is absolutely key. It is part of the human rights framework. We need to make sure that if these incidents are reported, that they are properly investigated. But let's also face it, unfortunately, in a climate that is often very chaotic, there's also a lot of misinformation and disinformation, which is all the more important to go to the facts, to identify the perpetrators and to bring them to justice.
If you'd like to ask a question, please put your hands up and my colleagues will pass the mic. I will actually start, if you don't mind. I've received a question by email for the High Commissioner. How does the UN Human Rights Chief feel about the killing of individual members or supporters of the overthrown regime under the pretext of mob justice or mob atrocities? We'll take 2 more questions.
Hi, this is Sabiha. I work at AFP. I guess I have 2 or 3 questions. May I? Do you have any plan to set up an office here? And if yes, do you have any time period in mind? This is my first question. And my second question is, as we know from our advisors through their interviews that you discussed about the issues that are concerning some about the ICD. So do you have any concerns or questions about fair trial, whether they would be able to serve justice to all? Thank you.
Excellence over here. My name is Mohsin. I work for Delhi Shabaka. My question regarding the office issue. I mean, there is a controversy in the Bangladesh regarding that office. So, I mean, why human rights is look like it's a political tool all over the world? Why your office? I mean, this kind of office is not open, whether in UK or USA or in the Western world. Why does not happen? Why this? I mean, human rights issue as used to suppress the weak countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, or in African countries. Why? This is my first question. And second question, I mean, do you see any change in the human rights situation in Bangladesh? I mean, apart from the government, what changes you have watched? Thank you.
Look, first of all, I think there were this question about office. What I said is when a country goes through a transition period, as in many other situations around the world, we can support a transition period because human rights is part of governance, it's part of the new fabric of a society, it's part of a new social contract. And there is a lot of support out there. There are many experiences from around the world. They can be extremely useful, and to be honest, I heard both from human rights defenders, from the students, from the civil society members that I met, from the members of government, that there was a lot of requests. Can you share this with us? What do you think about that? How do you undertake, judicial reform? Do you have comments on this law? And so there is a huge need to provide that support. My function is to provide that support to countries that ask for it. That's exactly what we're doing. I think we also need to look at human rights perhaps in a different way. Because there is, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation also about human rights. Some see it as a Western concept. Some see it only from the perspective that it's civil and political. Some see it as something that is maybe an imposition. But if I look at this country, well, first of all, the history of this country is rife with human rights and social movements on so many fronts, coming to women's labor movements, what you did in order to, also the last couple of months. It was about freedom, and it was a cry for freedom, and human rights was part and parcel of what students were saying and were clamoring for. And I think, so human rights is not an issue of one part of the world, it is an issue that is truly universal, which is why you have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted 75 years ago by all member states and reiterated again and again and again. By the way, I have a presence in about 100 countries, including in the Western world. For instance, we have a regional office in Brussels. We have an office, of course, an office in New York. So we have office presences. The problem that I have is that I don't get enough financing. I wish I could have an office everywhere, but unfortunately I don't get the funding. So as a result, we have to prioritize. And I want to prioritize precisely the situations where there is most need. And yes, transitions are often they are what they are. They are difficult sometimes, and they need support from everyone who can provide that support. And that's the offer that I have made to the authorities here, to the society here. And as I said, there was a lot of interest, a lot of also embracing of it, and we need to honor that. That's my duty to the people of Bangladesh. The issue of ICT, yes, I think it's very clear from the perspective of human rights law, and if you look at the ICT and both in the way that the law was constructed and it was set up, there are issues of compliance with international human rights standards, and they need to be addressed. And both when it comes to fair trial, but also to due process guarantees. And it's really important to reform that. I've discussed it with the authorities. There was a very open mind to that. And that's often the problem. You have an interim administration that has not even been in in office for not even 3 months. The expectations are extremely high. The changes need to be made are enormous. So we also need to, well, first of all, provide them the support that is required, but also exercise patience and manage our expectations. But law reform is absolutely critical when it comes to that. Then the issue of, you mentioned mob justice. Of course, violence committed by whoever commits it and hurts another human being, well, that obviously needs to be investigated. So it's not acceptable to have mob justice of any kind, and that's why you need the rule of law system to kick in and to provide precisely that type of response, because otherwise violence begets violence, as we see in so many situations around the world. Yes, as I mentioned, when it comes to change, there is a very different Bangladesh that I'm discovering, and I'm very grateful for that.
We can do one more round of 3 questions.
This is Abdul Kalam from the Ministry. You have already mentioned something about justice and fair trial, but I have a question. There have been incidents of attacks on accused defendants and even defense lawyers on premises in Bangladesh. And controversy arises on how murder cases being filed. So how does UN see this matter?
Hi, my name is Tazar Mahmoud. I work for Shomi TV. There have been a lot of human rights violations in July and August, and mostly carried out by the police forces. But after taking in charge, this interim government has given immunity to all those police officers that have been killed. Do you support that? How do you see that? The police officers who have been killed, no cases should be filed against them. So how do you see it? My first question. My second question is, if an office is established in Dhaka, so what would their scope of work would be? Thank you.
Thank you. This is me, Ahmed Reza, and I'm working for a television named Jomuna. So my question is to you that you have a number of discussion with our advisor level, and you have a discussion with the chief advisor as well. So and you talked with them about the human rights situation in Bangladesh. So my question is to you that do you have that kind of confidence to the interim government that they can solve the situation, or they can heal the situation in a greater perspective? Thank you so much.
Look, on the first question, which was around filing of cases, as I mentioned also during my statement, I welcome very much that this was recognized as an issue, because of course we cannot have the filing of cases on charges that are not properly done, and it's therefore extremely important to resolve this. And there is I understand a commission that was set up precisely to address this issue. It's really important in such a period that we don't repeat the patterns of the past, that justice is properly served, which means it has to be properly investigated, and charges need to be brought against precisely those who have committed crimes, and then they are also entitled to fair trial and due process standards. And I understand this commission is currently looking into this, and I welcome that they have done this. Look, when it comes to any killings, they need to be investigated, irrespective of the perpetrator. That's very clear. Killings, all killings need to be investigated. That's what human rights demands, because we cannot allow killings to happen with impunity. Well, look, when it comes to a strengthened, enhanced support to Bangladesh from a human rights perspective, it means that it would obviously accompany the reform process, because all the areas of reform that are currently being undertaken, they all have a human rights component, be it the judicial reform, be it rule of law reform more generally, be it the issue of police reform, be it police reform means use of force. When do you use of force, what is acceptable into human rights law. We have had many examples in many countries around the world where precisely this issue had to be regulated. It's also about how to conduct proper investigations, how to build national ownership, including when it comes to the national human rights institutions here. And so our task is really to provide enhanced support to this transition at this very critical juncture. And look, I have met some remarkable individuals over the last 2 days, and really I'm in awe for who I've met in this country. So I have full confidence in the resilience, in the creativity, in the spirit of the people, including the ones who currently lead it. I think it's also very important to bear in mind that transitions, as I mentioned, are often fragile, and they require a lot of support from everyone, both, of course, first and foremost by people of Bangladesh, but also by the international community, and that has to be recognized, and I really call for that support. And that is also part of my mission here. It was a mission of solidarity, and it was a mission of support to Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
মোবাইলটা